Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
Hey, Bobby Manning here. Welcome to a Sunday edition of the Garden Report. Just a couple hours after our post-game show, we're back at it, recapping the season with Chris Gasper from the Boston Globe, who we haven't seen a ton of you around, Chris. It's almost playoff time. I'm hoping we'll see you back at the Garden soon, maybe as soon as next weekend.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, absolutely. Been a little bit of a shift in what's going on for me. I think the last game I did, might have been OKC. When OKC came to Boston, I think that might have been.
That was the last game that mattered.
Yeah.
It's been a
yeah, I guess that's one way of looking at it.
Yeah.
I only show up for the games that matter.
It's so tough. John's been telling me, John Zanis, about how this year is like the Patriots years where you knew a game wasn't going to matter until the AFC Championship game. And that's where the Celtics are at right now, it feels like. Whole regular season, I mean, they got what they need to do done. First two rounds look like they'll be heavy favorites. Then we'll see what happens when it gets to Cleveland or Indiana or whatever that's going to be.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And, having covered the Patriots for the last 20 years, that is very much what it was like. I mean, there were fun regular season games. We all remember some of those games against the Colts or against the Seahawks or the Ravens or some sort of comeback like in 2013, the comeback against the Saints. But the reality is the Patriots were measured not on what they were going to do in the regular season, but it was all about the postseason. It was sort of these all or nothing seasons. It was championship or bust. And it very much feels that way, I think, for the Celtics coming off the title last year and just what the expectations were this year going into it. And with Brad Stevens bringing back basically the entire roster minus O'Shea Brissett, this is what we've been waiting for since they tipped it off against the Knicks back in October. It's these games that are coming up right now. This is the only season that matters for them. Doesn't mean you can't enjoy the regular season, but the reality is they're going to be defined by what happens now moving into the postseason, what happens from now until hopefully late June.
Yeah, and some fun stuff happened along the way. Tatum averaged 6 assists a game. I think that's a real milestone for him. He'll probably be third or fourth in MVP. He took a step this year. Porzingis came back well from the injury. Maybe better than ever. He was awesome when he was available this year. And, his availability is still a bit of a question, even though there's nothing wrong right now. You're always wondering if that's around the corner. But I think pretty much everything shored up here. The way it ended the year, they didn't have a ton of competition down the stretch, but Holiday turned things around. Hauser got going. And pretty much everything looks good here except Jaylen Brown. And, I was so interested to hear your opinion on this because I'm sure you've been watching it from afar and, keeping up with the developments here. This is I don't know what way you want to slice it, but it's not good. Like, it might not be that bad. It might not be disruptive, or it could be terrible, but it's not good. And we've had our back and forth with the fans, and some people think we're freaking out about this too much. Jaylen hasn't looked like himself in a number of weeks here. He's missed numerous games, and then ESPN reported, I believe yesterday or today, that he received injection for pain management, which leaves it pretty ambiguous what he actually received here. I know some of the doctors on Twitter were kicking around, is it PRP? Is it steroid? What's actually the injury here even? Because the Celtics aren't listing a specific injury whenever they put him on their injury report. I know they had a bone bruise a number of weeks ago here. So Joe Mazzulla said today he's 100% confident Brown will be good to go at the start of the playoffs. How much does that mean we'll see him? He was on a 30-minute limit that went down to 22, it looked like, over the last two games. Then he tried to play in Orlando on Wednesday, and for some reason or another didn't, and then didn't play the last 3 games here. So that's where we're at. I don't know how to feel about this because we don't have a lot of information. But again, the only thing I can say is it's just not good for your second best player to be in this position physically going into the playoffs.
No, it's definitely not. And clearly it's their biggest concern, Bobby. And the reason I'm concerned is twofold. Is one, it said that there were injections, plural. That's what Ramona Shelburne, who's an excellent reporter, used. She used the term injections, plural. And for it to get to a point where somebody like Jaylen, who I think is, very mindful, very much believes in what he believes in terms of what goes into your body and what you do and how you handle things, like to me, and I don't know this speaking to him, I'm just looking at this and saying, based on covering him for years and what we've seen from him, like an injection type of deal is kind of a last resort. Like that's not something that he would immediately raise his hand and say, hey, inject me with, these chemicals. Now, I know some people have said it could be a platelet-rich plasma, which would be his own blood. But again, if you look at that, that takes, according to doctors that I have seen and that have posted stuff, like that takes 4 to 6 weeks to really do its thing.
It seems apparent that that's not what this was.
Yeah, and that's not really a pain management thing. That's more like promoting healing. So this sort of feels like, and again, we're speculating, something related to pain management. Either you're shooting it up or it's like an anti-inflammatory or something like that. And I think we all know that's not really the first choice of Jaylen Brown. Like he wouldn't go there. And also just the fact that he feels like he needs it. This is a guy that is sort of a basketball warrior who is very mentally tough, who has that Mamba mentality, mind over matter and all that stuff. And it gets to a point physically where he both feels and realizes with his own play, I need a little help here. I'm not sure that I can make it to the finish line just on my own and just on pure willpower. So that's where, for me, it's concerning. And then the last thing I'd throw in, just in terms of the concern level, before we move on and sort of say, what does it mean? Just from a concern level, I also have to throw in there, and this has nothing to do with Jaylen, but like the Celtics' history with this is not great. They have a history of sort of like downplaying.
Yeah.
They've done this for a long time. Yeah, I mean, you remember
Can we
back
list
in
them off?
bubble
We
with
got
Kemba?
Isaiah.
Yeah,
we got Kemba,
IT, Kemba,
Kevin
Kemba
Garnett.
really for 2 postseasons, right? Wasn't right, and they kind of downplayed it. And I'm not saying Kemba had a chronic knee injury. I'm not saying that's the situation for Jaylen Brown. But, Joe Mazzulla answering your excellent question, saying he's 100% confident they're going to see the real like that doesn't give me a lot of solace, because this organization has said stuff like that in the past, and it's turned out not to
Joe
be true.
Mazzulla infamously said after the Game 2 injury to Kristaps Porzingis in the finals that there was zero concern. And then we got the news the next day that he tore his something we've never heard of before, and then was out for the next two to 3 games there. He played the third, but, wasn't right, and then had to have surgery. So that's Mazzulla's credibility on the injuries here. And again, his stance is usually that he just doesn't know. And he doesn't want to talk for the players when it comes to their injuries. He wants them to talk for themselves. So I get his stance there. It doesn't give us much solace about Brown's availability here, because, and the ESPN report said too that there's an expectation that he's going to be ready to go here. And I don't have a concern about that as much as how much Jaylen are you seeing at that point, because we're not talking about a week or two since we've seen Jaylen at least at real minutes. And certainly playoff minutes. He averaged 37 a game last year in the postseason. That's going to be a ramp-up process for him, I'm sure. And does that mean round 1 we only see him on a minutes limit, and he has to work his way up toward a full workload later in the playoffs? That obviously leads to some tough rotation decisions, I think, for Joe Mazzulla. And I'll give Joe credit. I do believe if it comes down to it and Jaylen doesn't have it some night, or there's a better option for them to go to, he'll go in that direction. I think we've seen it in different spots in recent years after that first year where, they were juggling guards in the backcourt there and mostly deferring to just Smart and Brogdon. I think he's in a much better position now to actually make a change if necessary in that spot. But it just makes coaching the game, it makes managing the game, it makes the game expectations for this team a lot more turbulent, I'd say, because we've seen Jaylen at this point look great. There was the Phoenix game. He had 31 in that one, I believe, while managing this thing. And then the Knicks game, he comes out at the end of the third and didn't play the rest of the night and didn't look like himself really at all in that game. So I do think just projecting out that there's going to be some ups and downs to his return here for the postseason that add to a little bit of the uncertainty, at least game to game with this team, because you don't know what it's going to look like on any given night. And then you're going to have to adjust on the fly.
Yeah, it is. That's a great point. Now, that's where their depth comes in, and they certainly have, the ability. We saw this last year when Porzingis went down and Drew Holiday stepped up and suddenly was, all-star Drew Holiday again and was part of a big 3. He was able to step up and fill in for Porzingis. Maybe that's a role he has to take, or Derek White has to take, if Jaylen Brown's not the full Jaylen Brown. The other thing for me that is concerning about this, and you hit on it, I have no doubt he's going to try and play these games, and he will play in these games. It's just how effective can he be? And if I were thinking off the top of my head, Bobby, who's the one Celtic who most needs to feel athletic and explosive and plays off a burst, it's Jaylen Brown. This might benefit him later on in his career. Maybe we find there's a version of Jedi Jaylen here that he learns and it helps him.
I did find that press conference very compelling, even if there was moments in there where you're like, do I actually believe that? But yeah, it was a very compelling case he made that he's going to change his game here and play a different way.
But, and he can try, but I mean, that's difficult to do on the fly. And, his game is a lot about edge, athleticism, explosiveness, burst. And if you take all that stuff away and to just play, amateur psychologist, if he goes into games knowing he doesn't have that burst, that can affect the way that the guy plays as well. So maybe if this were a different player who had a sort of different game, or was at a different point in his career where he's not relying as much on explosiveness and athleticism, I wouldn't be as concerned about this. But given that it's Jaylen and that's such a big part of his game on both ends of the floor, offense and defense, that's where I'm concerned about it in terms of how much of a contribution, can he really make? And I guess my question that I would ask you would be like, okay, you look at last year, and this is what a lot of Celtics fans will tell you, and rightfully so. Hey, they basically won the thing without Porzingis. I mean, he was available for 6.5 of the 19 postseason games that they played because he originally got hurt in the first round against Miami in the first half, and they didn't really miss a beat. But do you feel like if it's the same thing with Jaylen, maybe not missing that percentage of games, but can they do the same thing with Jaylen if he's not full go and he can't give him that contribution that they were able to do without Porzingis last postseason?
I don't think so, because I think the path's going to be more challenging, like Oklahoma City specifically. And you had a replacement in Porzingis's case that was so substantial in Al Horford and starting level, and raised his level to, the defensive feats we saw him pull off during that stretch and some of the shooting nights and all that. Like, you just know Al Horford's capable of stepping into Porzingis's shoes, playing a different style, certainly, and all that. But, he's just right on that level, a little bit below Porzingis, where the replacement there is effective. With Brown, I guess Porzingis is part of that dynamic, and he's available and good to go and rolling heading into the playoffs this time. So maybe that gives you, at least from a point standpoint, confidence that you can get what you need to there. And I think Derek White, as far as Jaylen's role, can replicate a lot of the stuff that he does, the defensive assignments, the playmaking, the shooting, certainly, and scoring. So I think they have the pieces there to make it work if he was going to miss time or is limited in a game. I don't think there's any worry about that. I think there's two things, though, that Jaylen gives you that would be difficult to replace, at least compared to last postseason's run. The on-ball defense he played against some of the better assignments, Luka specifically, what he did in the finals there against him. If you're going to go up against a Shea or some guys like that down the line, is anyone else able to handle that assignment at the level Brown did last year? That's a question. And then I was looking at it, Chris, I talked to Joe a little bit about this, over the last couple of weeks here. Since the start of March, they dropped to last in pace. And I don't know what that means, but one of the things I was looking at there is, Jaylen's really the only fast break player, or consistent high-level fast break player, who gets them out on the run. I think he was like third in transition possessions last year, period, in the league. And I think he was number one efficiency 2 years ago, I want to say. So he had this great run over the previous 2 years coming into this year of playing in transition. And he even talked about, through some of the comments we're referencing here, how he's had to mostly give that up with this injury as he tries to play a different way. And you look at the possessions, he's down like 2 transition possessions per game compared to last year.
Wow.
And I don't think you can get that from anyone else on the roster. Like, Tatum plays a slow game. Porzingis, it's a methodical style. Even White and Holiday, those guys aren't really getting out on the run a ton. Yeah, so true. Do they need to run and play in transition to win? Not necessarily, but it's an element that they don't have if Brown's not right now.
That's a really great point. I didn't realize they had dipped that far in pace. And what's interesting about it is, that was the best month in Celtics history, right? 14-1. And that was
they're
also
great in the half court too,
Yeah, they're great at so many things. But what's interesting about that, Bobby, is you mentioned the pace slowdown. I wonder how much of that was Porzingis, because I was going to say to you, if they are going to win without Brown, they need the March Porzingis, who was immense. And 21.7 points per game, more than 7 rebounds. He was a real force in March. And so to pick up the slack, I think they're going to need more from Porzingis if Jaylen Brown isn't sort of the full JB. And then the thing you worry about that with Porzingis, he's capable of it from a talent standpoint, but do you want to put that burden on him night in and night out? And then does he break down? So that's kind of part of the concern. But from a point standpoint and just trying to fill maybe some of what Jaylen Brown gives you when you have this great tandem with Tatum, clearly the lead dog, but they have, the best tandem in the league and in Tatum and Brown for my money. So if you want to try and replicate that without Jaylen or without normal Jaylen, then it becomes Porzingis. And to your point, that changes the way you have to play. Like, you have to give Porzingis some high post touches. You have to give him some paint touches. And as you mentioned, it does slow it down a little bit. And it worked for them clearly in March. That's one thing I'll say about any championship team in any sport. And this is what I like about the Celtics. And this was one of the things I've said for years. If you're going to be a champion, you have to have more than one way to win. You have to be a versatile team. You have to be able to win different ways. So whether it's winning with defense, whether it's winning with your offense and how efficient it is, winning with the three, winning in the half court, maybe winning with some post-up stuff with Porzingis. I think they do have the capability to do all that. They have all that stuff at their disposal. But as you said, it's going to be, I think, a little bit of a feeling out process of trying to figure that out as they go through the playoffs. What do they need in each series, and what works best in a particular series or on a particular night?
Yeah, and I thought Pritchard had a great quote today. I asked him how they're preparing for Jaylen to potentially miss time here, and he said if he's able to play, then we go ahead and play. If he doesn't, guys will have to step up and fill in those different areas. Our team's well-balanced and very deep. Obviously, we want everybody healthy, but if not, guys got to be ready to step up. They have a lot of other stuff that they can go to here, and I want to talk in just a second here about, some of the ways they changed this year. And they had an interesting regular season in that aspect. I wonder what could actually factor into the postseason here after we saw some new things in this regular season. But want to shout out Game Time. Fenway back in action, baseball games rolling as spring gets going here, and Game Time has all your tickets. It's not great baseball weather now, but next week it could be 60s, 70s again, and you want to be right back out there at Fenway. And Game Time's the place to go. Why? Because at Fenway there's all those obstructions. You don't know what you're going to be getting seat wise if you're buying tickets, but they have the panoramic view that's going to show you where you're sitting, what your view is before you buy. Also got the lowest price guarantee, or they'll credit you 110% of the difference, all in pricing, so you know what you're going to pay at checkout before you even get there. And then sports, concerts, comedy, theater, it's not just the games. They got everything over there on Game Time. So go check them out, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase over there at Game Time. Again, great experience, been using them forever. So go check them out. And again, use that code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. What time is it? Game Time. And check out Prize Picks right now as well. Basketball playoffs coming around the corner. You got Giannis, you got Jokic, you got all these stars who are going to be playing here. Well, check out their stat projections. Pick more or less on two or more players, and you have your daily fantasy team. They've made daily fantasy sports accessible here, and you can win while you're at it. Over there on Prize Picks, you can combine different leagues. So if you're watching the hockey playoffs and basketball playoffs, you can pick players from both leagues for your team, as well as baseball going on right now as well. So it's a great time over there, springtime, to go check out Prize Picks and use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup over there. Again, just an awesome experience. I like to go over there and just see what they think guys are going to score on any given night, or how many rebounds that they're going to have. And all you have to do is pick more or less on a few player stats for your shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. Second half of basketball season's here. Shohei's back at it. Juan Soto. All the stars are over on Prize Picks, and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. So, Chris, when we're talking about the alternatives to Jaylen here, things that this team can get to, things that this team learned about itself through the course of the year here, I think of three. You got the Pritchard thing. He's probably going to win Sixth Man of the Year here. He had the 20, sometimes 30, as you see here, with extra opportunity scoring that he flashed this season. A little bit more inconsistency, I'd say, over the last month or two, highs and lows. But, he became a pretty big scoring rock for them this year that he wasn't in years past in a much larger role. So he's something they could lean on here. I'll even throw, just from a lineup versatility standpoint, Luke Cornett. And I think people who haven't watched the team a ton this year or maybe tuning in for the playoffs will laugh at that. But he legitimately became this physical, offensive rebounding, size force for them out there this year.
Yeah.
Who does a lot of good things. And I actually think we're going to see him play a lot of playoff minutes out there.
He's an excellent rim runner.
Yeah. Alley-oops, he gives them that. And, it's almost Rob Williams-esque, even though he's not the athlete Rob was. Like, he fills that role a little bit for them.
I was going to say that, yeah.
Out of all these things, and maybe you're thinking of something else that I'm not here, what's most likely to actually pan out in the playoffs for the Celtics that we saw this regular season?
Ooh, in terms of like scoring alternatives or just the way they played or?
Yeah, way they played, things we saw during the year. Like, is Pritchard going to be the Pritchard we saw all year in the playoffs? Are we going to see this Luke, in the playoffs? Stuff like that.
That's an interesting question. As I think about, the thing that comes to mind for me that I wanted to bring up was I know in the beginning of the year, there was a lot of focus, particularly, that Memphis game when they just let Drew Holiday shoot all those shots.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And I don't know if people know, the second half of the year, not statistically, but post All-Star break is really what I'm trying to say. He shot 38.5% from three. That's what Drew Holiday normally shoots from three. So I would expect him to be able to up his offense and knock down shots in the playoffs. And, we always talk about and joke about and enjoy playoff Al. I think we're at the point where there's playoff Drew. Like, I think he saves a little something extra for the playoffs.
I've been wondering that all year. Like, are we actually seeing decline, or is he just skating through the year and waiting for game one?
I think it's the latter. You've seen more of the team than I have. I was concerned at one point about that mallet finger, but now I'm not. So that's something that we've seen, post All-Star break, they go 23-5. Drew shot the ball a lot better. He's looked like Drew. I think that's something that carries over big time into the playoffs.
I feel like we haven't seen him on the big defensive assignments yet either. Whether it's a Towns, whether it's some of those guys you might want to use him on in the playoffs, Giannis down the line if it came to something like that. That's something they went to a lot last year that I don't think we saw as much this year. He's really good in the zones too. We didn't see a lot of that late in the regular season. So I'll be interested to see where he's at on both ends going into the playoffs, and whether, again, that was real decline we saw at points this year, or whether he just managed his whole way through. I think that is a good question, because if you get the 2024 playoff, Drew, that changes a lot. Yeah, and then you could even throw Al into that too. Like, there were times this year where Al looked like the old Al, and if you get that for the whole playoff run too, on top of Porzingis, you just have a lot of options at that point.
Yeah, it just depends on sort of what they ask of these guys. I really do think, and Joe does such a great job of focusing on the present, the here and now. He doesn't let the narrative really extend beyond the games they're playing. He didn't let the team take the regular season for granted, and I'm sure that's a constant battle. Again, you were around a team a lot. I did think there was a point in the season where regular season boredom hit them. That stretch in December and January where they went about 13-10. I thought that was it. But, I think if you injected the entire organization with truth serum, they would have to admit to you, they've been saving a little something in reserve, something in the tank for the playoffs all year long. And they've approached the entire season, and guys like Horford and Holiday and the lineup management and all that stuff with an eye towards, we want to be, as Joe said today about Jaylen, I'm not afraid that, I'm confident that he'll be at his best when it matters most. And I think that's sort of what they've had an eye on for the entire team. They want to be at their best when it matters most.
Yeah, and the first round isn't necessarily where it matters most, but two semi-interesting teams here potentially lining up against them, in that both of them beat the Celtics 2 out of 3 times during the regular season. Now, in the Magic's case, Tatum went down sick before the first game that they played down there, and that threw everything for a loop, and Cole Anthony went crazy, and they ended up losing that game. They won the next game they played against them pretty handily, and then they played again this week and no one played. So it's tough to pull too much from that one. The Hawks, however, beat Boston straight up in Boston twice. One was that really weird finish where Drew was throwing the ball all over the place at the end of the game there, and
he committed the foul. He committed the foul.
And he committed the foul up too.
He didn't know that they didn't have a foul to give, but then they said afterwards he did know. Everybody was like, no, he knew. Yeah, that wasn't a mistake.
That
but
was
if
a low
you
point for
didn't
Holiday
know,
this year to mention that. Yeah. So can either of these teams beat Boston? No. Does it really matter which one of them they're going to play? Probably not here. But the Magic do have this thing, they're number 2 defense in the league, I believe, and they're super physical. I think they have a great coach, and they've played the Celtics tough the last couple of years. They're missing Jalen Suggs. Mo Wagner is a great piece for them, went down early in the year. So they're pretty depleted right now, and their offense is 27th. They shoot the fewest threes in the league. They never make threes ever. And even against that like Celtics G League lineup that they put out the other night, they only scored 96. So I don't have high confidence in them pushing the Celtics super far either, but they do at least have that defense that could test Boston. And then with the Hawks, it's Trae Young, who has had some success against them in the past. They pushed that series to 6 games last year. Quinn Snyder's a great coach too. I actually feel like he coaches about as well against Missoula as anyone else in the league there.
great point.
So do you care about which way this goes, or does it matter at all for Boston here? And do you actually want to see them get tested a little bit in round 1, if that's even possible?
I do think it matters a little bit, just in terms of the overall big picture. When you're looking at the whole mosaic of time management, physical management, trying to get to the finish line, which is obviously lifting the Larry O'Brien trophy again. You don't want to have to waste time and effort and blood, sweat, and tears in the first round that you might need later, because as you've already pointed out, we're anticipating a tougher road to the finals this year than last year, where the Celtics were able to win the whole thing and it only took 19 games played. So I do think it matters. Now, before I came on with you, I was thinking Orlando was the tougher matchup, because I was thinking Paolo Banchero, young superstar, Franz Wagner is a big, and that's sort of something I think at times, even though we've sang the praises of Porzingis and Horford and Cornette, I think some skilled bigs at times have given the Celtics problems. You mentioned the defense there. Orlando does have some length. I was thinking Orlando was the tougher matchup going into this, but you made a pretty good case for Atlanta when you're mentioning Quinn Snyder, what Trae Young can do. Okongwu, I feel like, always plays well against the Celtics. And now
Karis LeVert is on the Hawks now, who's on the Celtics killer list that I have.
That's a great point. And then Okongwu's kind of added the 3 this year to his game. And I feel like
he's starting now with Clint Capella,
with his athleticism and energy, and he can knock down shots. If they had Jalen Johnson, it would be really a different story. Ricochet has been better. Had a career high 38 points the other night. So now I kind of am on the fence as to which one is more difficult, but I was leaning.
They can actually put the ball in the basket. So it'll be interesting. The Magic blew out the Hawks last week. They played on Tuesday, I think, in a game that swung the play-in positioning there. They played today, and I don't think anyone played, so can't pull too much from that one. But the Magic look like in this matchup against the Hawks, they have an edge here. I do think you have a good point there that the Hawks might actually have more of what it takes to push the Celtics, especially like if these two teams, Celtics and Magic, are going to show up and the Celtics are shooting 63s and the Magic are shooting 24 or something like that. Like it's just not going to happen. So I don't know how they get around that. Paolo's great. He's averaged 30 a game recently. Franz had a little bit going for him, a year or two ago and lost that shot, which killed him. And then they just have a lot of guys who are just going to knock you around. Jonathan Isaac, Wendell Carter, Goga Batadze. So yeah, you're just going to want to come out of that series unscathed physically. And I think that would be all you're looking for there, because round 2 is going to be interesting here too, as it lines up. The Knicks are going to play the Pistons. Celtics would inevitably get the winner of that one. We talked about the Knicks a little bit and how that went on Tuesday. It still blows my mind that as much as they try to build a team to match up with Boston, they did the worst job you could ever imagine a team do this year. Like it looked easy for the Celtics playing against them. Even that last game where they had the most trouble, that Tatum's getting an open 3 at the end of regulation. Porzingis is hitting a shot from half court to win it. Like everything just went right for them in this matchup. And then you have Detroit. I don't know how much attention you've paid to them this year, Chris. They are just such a great story. It's like one of my favorite stories I've seen in the league in all my time covering it. They lose 28 straight games last year. They're the worst team in recent history. And then this year they come in and they're beating everybody. They beat the Knicks 3 out of 4 times. I think they beat the Celtics pretty badly the last time they played them. You got Oscar Thompson flying around everywhere after he went down with blood clots last year, and he's been awesome. Malik Beasley is going to be in that sixth man of the year race with Pritchard and has the second most threes in the league, and he's doing the wiggle every time he hits it. They're just so much fun. I don't know if they're actually good. Isaiah Stewart's trying to fight everybody, and they actually do get in a brawl like every week, it seems like. So,
like the old bad boy Pistons.
Yeah, I don't know if they can actually beat the Knicks here, but there's suddenly this really interesting team in the East that had a chance to move up to fifth. They were in the play to move up to fourth at one point in recent weeks. And I think they finished this year. I was just talking to Brian Barrett on his show. I think they finished sixth in net rating 10 the year. So this team that was the worst team in the league by far last year really didn't change too much other than the coach, is suddenly this semi-real player in the East. And if you look at what Cade Cunningham's done this year, he has the case to be the best player in this series, as great as Brunson is, and Towns too. So I don't know. This could be an interesting one too as it plays out for the Celtics, because you thought them and the Knicks were on this collision course. I think the Pistons might actually win this series or have a chance to.
I definitely think the Pistons have a chance to. At the end of the day, I think they're a little young. And, Jalen Duren's another guy who's had a good year. He's a good defender, rim runner type of guy. My concern about Detroit, and I know they beat the Knicks 3 out of 4 in the regular season, would be in a 7-game playoff series. Say what you will about the Knicks. And look, they are the ultimate fraud, ultimate faux contender. They went 0-10 this year against the 3 best teams in the league, OKC, the Celtics, and the Cavaliers. Unbelievable. And the Celtics had beat them by an average of 21 points per game in the first 3 matchups before they, stole the last one. And when I say steal, I don't mean the Celtics didn't deserve to win it. I mean, the Knicks basically gave it to them, allowed them to steal.
And their fans can't stand the coach. And I understand why.
I have a soft spot for Tibbs, but I would agree with you. I also understand. I mean, back in the day, I covered him when he was Doc's kind of defensive coordinator in those championship Celtic teams. He was a difference maker, but I look, the stuff about him is legit. In-game management, minutes management, the minutes, and not balancing the team. I mean, I thought all year long, I looked at that Knicks team and I'm like, why are they starting all 5 of these guys? Like, one of these guys needs to go to the bench. It's better for the team, just to switch the rotations and balance the rotations. And they never did it. I was like, you could put someone like Precious Achiuwa or Miles McBride or somebody else in the starting lineup and then have somebody come off the bench there, whether it's the Anunoby and Mikal Bridges would probably be the chief candidates, and they never did it. And I was like, why are you just with this 5? But anyways, I do look at it, and I think that's a 6 or 7 game series, but I expect the Knicks to win. Brunson's a clutch player. And I look at the Pistons, and I just don't know where the scoring comes from outside of Cunningham and Beasley on a consistent night-to-night basis in a playoff series like that.
And then do we just see more of the same if it is Celtics Knicks of what we've seen all year?
I think so. I do. And I think that's also the best matchup for the Celtics. I think the Celtics can dispatch the Knicks in 5 games. There's, it's minimal travel, obviously. It could be a minimal series, and that would help them overall in terms of the overall road that they need to traverse here to become the first team to repeat as NBA champions since the Warriors.
So that's where I get to the last question I got for you here, and it's the big picture one here. Who knows if they're actually going to see Cleveland down the line, but they finished with the better record than Boston. It got a little close late in the year, but they were pretty steadily ahead of Boston for most of the season. Split the season series, a few weird losses where they collapsed in the 4th. But it looked like they were the better team through the bulk of those games to me. So I feel pretty good with Cleveland here. But the big thing that looms is Oklahoma City. And, I want to pull up what the final number was after the season ended here. But I feel like, it's kind of a developing take I have, Chris, where we watched this team all year. They crushed Boston twice. And Boston was pretty fully healthy for both games there, home and away. They finished with a plus 12.7 net rating, which was just short, I believe, of the best mark ever for a team, Oklahoma City. Celtics were plus 11.7 last year. And they're almost in a similar spot as Boston was last year, where you're looking at them, everything says that they're going to win the championship statistically. Everything says they're the best team in the league, Oklahoma City. They've dominated the tougher conference out west. And I know it's going to be a trickier road for them to actually get to the finals here. But they have the MVP. They have a ton of depth. They have a great coach. they killed the Celtics twice. And I know the scores were close, but just watching those games, they were all over Boston. I hate to say it, but if I'm just being objective here, all the evidence in front of me says that the Thunder are probably going to win the championship here. And we'll see what actually comes down. If they're in a 7-game series and adjustments and injuries and all the rest there, what would actually happen in June. But as we go into this right now, I think the odds makers say this too. You probably have to lean Thunder just a little bit in terms of who you think is going to win the finals here. But how do you feel about that?
It's interesting. I still probably lean Celtics. I think there's a difference between regular season basketball and postseason basketball. I also think the Thunder will have the tougher road. It was interesting to watch how things played out in the West today, because I thought that when you looked at it, now you're in a circumstance. I thought maybe one of the potential contenders could end up playing another one really in a first round series. And I don't know if that's exactly going to happen. I think in a weird way, I know Jimmy Butler got banged up at the end and Steph Curry has the thumb and they lost, but in a weird way, I almost feel like it's better for Golden State to play like a young Houston team. So, Houston, that's the 2-7, the 4-5 matchup you have there is one where I still think Denver's the better team. I think the Lakers got a good draw in terms of ending up with the Timberwolves. So when you look at all of that, I think it could break down that a lot of the true contenders move on in the first round, which makes OKC's road tougher. I also go back a little bit to the 2022 NBA Finals, where I thought the Celtics were the more talented team than the Warriors, but experience mattered, and experience on that stage mattered.
Thunder haven't been out of the second round.
Exactly. And in that 2022 playoff series, I thought the Warriors mentally broke the Celtics' will. And I'm just wondering if in a Celtics OKC series, the Celtics could turn the tables and do to OKC what Golden State did to them.
Yeah, OKC would have the best player in the series just based off what we've seen this year. But again, Shea hasn't been through that, hasn't had those expectations. Even nationally, I don't feel like he gets talked about much the way Tatum does or some of these other stars do in terms of, is he going to get it done? When's he going to get it done? The pressure's on. That thing that stars go through every time. I think there's just been a level of appreciation for what he's done. And he's a little bit older too. Like, he gets talked about as one of the younger guys and these up and comers, but he's Tatum's age in terms of, actual age there, and rather than time he's been in the league. So yeah, I'm interested to see what happens there when the Heat does dial up. And I know he's in Oklahoma. That's probably part of it. There's just not a lot of attention on that team, but with what they did this regular season, there's going to be some pressure there for that team to win it all. And the Celtics have already been through that, and we'll have the benefit of the doubt in many ways. Easier path probably here. I want to respect Cleveland, but we'll see. We'll see where both those teams are at health-wise when it gets there. But this Jaylen thing's a big deal. We're going to see where it goes throughout the week here. Celtics practicing on Tuesday and Wednesday, so hopefully we'll have some more updates on his availability ahead next weekend. I think we should get a loose schedule for this playoff series as well tonight as all the results go final here. And I appreciate Chris for jumping on and talking about it, and hopefully we'll discuss more with him later this playoffs. Great having you here as always, Chris.
It was great to be here. And the last thing I'll say is, I actually think the way the playoff schedule works out with the time in between games, that works in Jaylen Brown's favor. So keep that in mind.
Yes, there's always if they start Saturday, that's 2 days off before game 2. And then there's always a big gap between the game 2 and game 3 as well. So there could be some real rest time in that first round. And, if he needs to miss game 1, I don't think that'll be the end of the world for anyone either there, if he's got to take a little more time to get ready to go here. So we'll keep covering this. And unfortunately, it probably is going to be the story that dominates this whole postseason run, is just how he looks night to night. And we'll just keep talking about it here as much as it annoys everybody. So thanks, Chris. Check him out in the Boston Globe. And check us out probably on Tuesday after that playing game. We'll come in and start to preview that first round series for the Celtics here. And check out our Garden Report after the game today, last game of the year. Celtics finished the season 61 wins.
61 wins. Only 3 fewer than last year. 61 and 21.
Back-to-back 60-win years under Mazzulla. He's been incredible. As much as he's driven us crazy at times, he's had a hell of a run here the last 3 years. So shout out to him and that team. Chris Gasper, again, thank you. And we will talk to everybody else here on Tuesday. Peace.
No one's sneaking a vegan brownie by me, I'll tell you that.
Okay, you know what, John? We're gonna do it.
You have to feel that way too, Bobby.
I have to
Shane,
feel that
Shane,
way.
Shane.
Let's
Yeah.
slide Al over and make Luke your first center.
Bobby, we gave you Luke hour early. We are not going to end this on a damn conversation about Luke